It's my privilege to be here. Dr. Khalid is chairing session, Dr. Musab, and so many other senior colleagues over here. Abbas Raza is here. We go back to Allama Iqbal Medical College. We were together there. And he's, besides so many other things, he's the pride of Pakistan. He's the only Asian after the Japanese to have been the president of the International Society of Endocrinology. That's a privilege which, I don't think when it be matched in future. So today I'll be talking about something which is very basic to our clinical work. It has been touched before as well, and it's radioiodine and benign thyroid diseases, and it's a face-off with natural selection. A little bit of background. It's actually discussed everywhere these days. Dr. Saul Hertz, who started the theranostics, it was a eureka moment in 1936 when a meeting between physicists and physicians took place, and the physicians actually said what physics can do for biology and medicine, and the question put by Dr. Hertz was, can you label the radioactive iodine artificially, which was, the physics department was pretty active on that. They delivered it, and that's how the first series of hyperthyroid patients treated with radioactive iodine was documented. This is the historic document you see, the one in yellow, that's the initial paper, and now it's acknowledged. It has become very fashionable for this to be quoted everywhere, and this day celebrated as the Theranostics Day, since we are in this age of theranostics as of last 15 years. There's a congressional recognition for this as well, and now there's a Dr. Hertz Museum. I think his daughter sort of runs it, so it's a pretty big thing all over the place, and we are benefiting for it. In fact, what happens is whenever they think that theranostics is a new thing, the nuclear medicine can take it back to 1936 and this list from 1940s. Benign thyroid disease is quite simple, hyperthyroid and hyperthyroidism that we are dealing with. What nuclear medicine can offer is in diagnostics and therapeutics. Very simple basic slide: cold nodule, Graves' disease, MNG, hot nodule, thyroiditis, and we can do it with, over here we do it with pertechnetate. In Britain they can do it with iodine 123, and we treat it with iodine 131. Now this was the bread and butter of thyroid clinic. Apart from that, in pediatrics, the imaging is still there. The background is that most of the primary imaging of all thyroid stuff at the moment is ultrasound, as Abbas mentioned, but in pediatrics we still have the key for localization when patients have got hypothyroidism at birth and they want to see if the gland is absent or ectopically present, and again a simple thyroid scan can actually answer that question. Iodine therapy planning, we have this what you call fixed doses and dosimetric doses. Generally all over the world there's a preference to use fixed doses. It's simple and the outcomes have been same, apart from doing dosimetry. Our practice of not doing dosimetry has come under a question because with new therapies, with these lutetium therapies, there was a debate going on that nuclear medicine doesn't do dosimetry. The question mainly comes from radiation oncology, and then of course our stance was that there was data to prove that even without specific dosimetry, with fixed doses, radioactive iodine was good enough to treat hyperthyroidism, so there's a tendency not to do it. But now, since we have tools to do dosimetry for other things, there's a trend where dosimetry can also be done for hyperthyroid and other applications of I-131. In the E&M guidelines from 2021, you can see at the top, this is a very busy slide. It's about the general status and commentary on all the therapeutic options which are available in nuclear medicine, and at the top you can see that in benign thyroid disease and even in differentiated, dosimetry has still been listed as optional. But just a while ago I was discussing with Dr. Saima, and she was saying that now increasingly they are doing dosimetry because the tools are available, tools which are easy to use to do dosimetry, and especially for thyroid cancer patients with I-131. This is a paper from, I can't see the year now. Anyway, so they just compared the dosimetry-based RAI therapy with the fixed doses. They were having equal outcomes. The advantage was that if you do use dosimetry, then the likelihood of having a successful treatment, not just slipping down to hypothyroidism straight away, is better. So you can make them, there's greater likelihood of getting your patients treated and putting them in the category of euthyroid. So of course the success is equal, but there are advantages to doing dosimetry. Now this is a very interesting thing. This is actually the reason that I'm presenting this paper. This is 2023 International Survey of Clinical Practice Patterns in the Management of Graves' Disease. A decade of change. These very authors did a study 10 years earlier and published a survey, and then they have did the survey in 2023. They had a large 85 countries, 1252 responders, and which included endocrinologists, thyroid surgeons, nuclear physicians, head and neck surgery departments, internal medicine, and multiple societies you can see at the bottom of that chart. So of course, getting 1252 people from 50 to 85 countries was quite a survey which they did. And a result of this survey was that it discovered, firstly they looked at a few things. This is the laboratory testing trend and what sort of laboratory tests are done for the treatment of Graves' disease across the globe. And you can see that, we got free T4, TSH, and they've given the frequency. Antibodies are done as the most frequent, almost 77% of the clinicians use that, CBC, and so this is the trend. This was category A of the lab tests. In category B, you can see the functional and anatomic imaging. At the top, 61% rely on ultrasound, which is the best thing to do. And in the red box, you can see where the nuclear medicine testing is done. Thyroid scan with technetium or I123, which is available. Uptake studies are done. And of course, it depends which tracer. In the world where I123 is not available, I13V is of course available for uptake as well as therapeutic. Now, they had an index case, a 42-year-old female with Graves' disease, no other comorbidities. And so in the first pie chart is about the index case, and you can see that the blue area represents the anti-thyroid drugs. Then red is the RAI surgery or RAIN. What was CS? Anyway, in the index case, 91% of the patients will get anti-thyroid drugs. Now they have added, from the surveys they asked, if the patients had thyroid eye disease, then that index case, if she had thyroid eye disease, then ATD will be like 67%. And radioactive iodine will be very, very limited. With pregnancy planning, it can be 72. With older age, 81% almost. With persistent disease, that's where 24% might get radioactive iodine treatment. And in relapse, almost 37% can be treated with radiation. So this is the pattern. ATD comes first, and based on the particular scenario, the usage of ATD can go, and the usage of RAI will be the option of the clinicians. So this is sort of the pattern that you have. Now, they ask the clinicians to order in their preference, what would be in their treatment preference as from most important to least important. And the questions were about your hope for remission, avoid hypothyroidism, avoiding radiation, and avoid worsening of the eye diseases. And you can see the maximum 61 hope for remission. Avoiding hypothyroidism was preference of 436 of the those who voted. So the pattern has sort of changed. Initially they thought everybody is happy to become hypothyroid and they'll be treated, so it has changed. And radiation again is a concern. You see almost 433%, 433 were concerned about radiation. So these are the changing trends which actually dictate where RAI stands at the moment. Now this is interesting. This is a comparison between the survey of 2012 and 2023. So RAI was used most commonly in US. And this is the data, this is global data, but they had specific data from US as well. So in 2012, 45% would have been treated with RAI, while in 2023, only 7%. So this is the change in trend. So RAI has actually gone, really reduced number. In the middle, you have got thyroid eye disease. There's slight lessening over there, and in the pre-pregnancy planning as well, the usage of RAI has reduced. But you can see, as far as uncomplicated Graves' disease, you can see the preferences for ATD. So this survey summarized it as a typical patient with uncomplicated Graves' disease will undergo laboratory testing without NM. You know, it was all about lab testing, ultrasound. A small number will get thyroid scans. And that's mainly to differentiate between Graves and a toxic MNG. Most common treatment is anti-thyroid drugs. You know, when we were trained, the idea was give them ATD for 2 years, then take them off. If they relapse, you go for RAI. It's no more the case. Now individuals are being kept at 80. Firstly, they hope for a remission. If it is not the case, they can continue on ATD as long as they can tolerate it and they're not getting any complications from that medication. And for the thyroid labs, 4 weeks after starting ATD, you do serial monitoring of the hormone levels, and they're 3 monthly. And if the patient experiences a relapse of Graves' disease following a treatment of a remission, she'll be likely 6 times more likely to be treated with RI than initial presentation. 15 minutes? Okay, I'll be quick now. So just 2 more slides. This is a Center for Clinical Best Practices based at AKU. They have a clinical translation research incubator which does this grade development thing to actually adapt different guidelines, evidence-based, done somewhere else in the West to a local setting. So this team, which is a very good team, they have looked at this and they've adapted the ATA guidelines for Pakistani setting. And it's good because you see they adapt, out of 124 recommendations, they adapted 71, excluded 49, and 4 they adjusted. One was when to do TSH in Graves' disease patient, and one was about LFTs, because there's more frequency of liver disease in this country. So this is a very good reference paper, how Western or other country guidelines can be adapted to local. They put a set of experts together and they look at it, mostly adapt it, slight changes, and then make it, rather than reinventing the wheel everywhere. So this was about the recommendation, and they basically recommended that national data should be here. So we should, because thyroid disease are treated everywhere, but we need to publish our data from every nook and corner, every department across the country to have a large database for our country. Yes, just concluding remarks. So when we see that the use of radioactive iodine is going down, do we just get worried somebody else is taking it? No. This is the natural selection. Now there's more reliance on ATD, which is good. We have got more space because we have got newer therapies on our hand with theranostics and all that. We can be doing that. So this is sort of whatever treatment you think is optimal, it will change over decades and centuries, and then new things will be on our table for us to deliver. Thank you.